Hello everybody, CritCrab here with another story, this one about a player who was convinced that since he was a self-proclaimed author that he knows better and as such should be in charge of role-playing, character creation, and even DMing, all from the comfort of the position of player character. Roll post. This was on Roll20 and it was a text-only game. A game was advertised with specific requirements. The GM wanted to run a game in which all characters adhered very strictly to classic archetypes. I don't remember the names of them off the top of my head, but it was something like the Knight, the Muscle, the Brains, the Lancer, which I understood to be kind of deadpan snarker from the description, the cynical foil to the idealistic Knight. The Knight and rightful heir had been expelled from the castle as a result of the Machiavellian prince. Fine, I thought. Sounds like a fun challenge. I like making characters to quite strict briefs. Sometimes the limitations force you to be more creative. I applied for the game with a character sketch and my experience playing 5e and text only on R20, boatloads and boatloads respectively. With the rogue archetype, I can do snark. My motivation, I think it was a while ago, for joining was the expelled knight, was a dislike of the privilege and politicking of the nobility, such as the conniving prince, with the knight representing an honorable alternative to lead the country. It wouldn't be that clear-cut, obviously. We've got a deadpan snarker on our hands. So I was planning to start off hating the lot of them and then gradually come around to the knight being one of the good guys. Prick his pomposity, but secretly respect him. You know how it goes. Peasant background, rogue with the heart of gold, possibly childhood friends with the knight to aid in the escape. We were going to work on the details together, but it was a solid skeleton. I get into the game for a session 0, character creation. At this point I've had a chat with the GM and he talked about my character idea in more depth and he said it was a-okay. And he was looking forward to the game. There are 2 other people in the game as I joined, the GM and a player, and it very quickly became clear that the GM is not in charge. That guy, I remember his R20 handle, but it feels harsh to post it. I feel as much as I'd like to, as I bet I'm not the only person to run afoul of him, seems to know the GM in real life and is clearly of the impression that he's running the game from the back seat. He is bulldozing the poor GM through everything. The game concept is very clearly his idea, and the GM isn't that interested. And as soon as I arrive, he takes it upon himself to be the casting director as well. Hey, nice to meet you. I'm that guy. I'm a player in this game. I'm also an author, so please don't be offended if I give you some advice. What character are you playing? What followed was an interrogation. Everything I said was wrong. No, give me more. Pathetic, that makes no sense. I'm so exasperated. You people, okay, listen to me. No, that's bull. Be careful. Use your mind. He went on a diatribe, barely stopped to breathe. Every other sentence was, trust me, I'm a writer, I know better than you, accept my feedback. But the feedback was no use at all. There was nothing wrong with the character, both in terms of the brief and more specifically in terms of meshing with the party. What was wrong, as quickly became clear, was that it didn't precisely fit into the story he wanted to tell, despite not being the GM. I tried to be flexible, to change stuff around, and to make it work. I wasn't welding into the character build after all, and I was more interested in having a functioning game, but it was like trying to argue with a cokehead outside a public toilet. He wanted to play my character for me, and ideally for him to be the GM as well. A little context on how intense this diatribe was. On Roll20 there's a certain amount of space in the chat box before it gets archived and you have to open up a new window to see it. This guy ranted for so long without reply over the most innocuous, minuscule stuff that he filled the chat box twice over and I had to open the log just to work out what his original point was after I made the mistake of going to make a cup of tea for 5 minutes. At one point I whispered the GM, saying question marks essentially, and he whispered back apologizing and saying that his friend who was going through a difficult time and he'd talk to him. This bought him another 20 minutes, during which he expanded his rant to include not only my malfeasance, but the cowardice of the GM, who apparently refused to vet me properly. Tone it down. What does that mean? Tone it down. I'm not playing a game with someone who can make a character. He isn't listening to any of my advice. He isn't listening to my advice, even though I already told him I am an author. Without the chat log in front of me, it's hard to adequately explain just how out of control this guy was. How pompous and how arrogant. He kept referring back to his own character as the ideal model for characterization. Though, as far as I can tell, his knight was the most dreary possible interpretation of the brief. I'd made it to 40 minutes before I said, I'm not being spoken to like I'm a child anymore. I've been playing this game for years. Come on, what is wrong with you people? And then I left the game. The GM sent me a direct message a little later, begging me to come back as the game had already collapsed like 3 times with players leaving for not correctly meeting the standards of this insane player. Please, he said, you seem like you can write. You understand the game. I'll talk him around. Anyways, absolutely not. I don't need that in my life. Shared the story with some players in another game through Roll20, and as soon as I said the guy's username, they all went, "Oh, yeah, that guy." Basically, he destroyed their game too. Turns out he's basically a wrecking ball, who I am sure is still demolishing unsuspecting Roll20 games to this day. The number of text-only 5e games advertised at any given time is pretty low, so it's a pretty tight community if those are your interests. Heck, maybe you've come across him too. Oh, and someone sent me his blog, which had his self-published writing on it. It goes without saying, it was absolutely terrible. End post. Well, guys, that seemed a little authoritarian. I'll stop. In all honesty, though, if this guy already writes books, then why is he trying to railroad the table from the PC's seat? All that aside, if you enjoyed this video, then by all means leave me a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please do subscribe to the channel. Till next time.